Thanks, Jerry. Thanks to Stuart and the RIU team. Thank you for the opportunity to present. It's great to be back on the east coast of Australia and talking to our investors and supporters here. To everyone online, thanks for listening in. I must admit, I'm a believer of the old adage that you save the best till last. I've canvassed the rest of the presenters this afternoon and they heavily agree with that sentiment. So thank you for tuning in. In terms of Hammer, we're a copper and gold explorer and we're exploring two of the world's great mineral provinces. We've had projects for 8 to 9 years in the Mount Isa province and we've amassed some 2,200 square kilometres of tenure there. And we're exploring in the Yandal belt for gold, a 24 million ounce province there where we've had tenure for the last 2 years. In terms of metals, I don't think there's two better metals to be currently exploring for in copper and gold. Copper's reached all-time highs recently, trading currently at about $9,500 a tonne. And I think the sentiment going forward with world electrification and I guess post-COVID recovery and stimulus, I think copper's got a way to go yet. And I think gold plays a very large part in the economy moving forward. In terms of the key points, we've already got 400,000 tonnes of copper equivalent metal in the portfolio, and I think that gives us an excellent start as an explorer to make that transition from being an explorer to a development story. In terms of that inventory, we've also got a recent copper discovery in Mount Isa as part of our joint venture with our joint venture partner JOGMEC, and that's really given us, a wind in our sails for 2021. We're well funded. We've recently completed a placement. We're well funded for the upcoming year. And importantly is having good projects is having good people and people with the experience to make mineral discoveries. And we have a couple of them on our board who are responsible for the world-class gold discovery at the Gruyere deposit for Gold Road. In terms of the market capitalisation of the company at the moment, we have a market cap of $75 million with $10 million in the bank. In terms of shareholders, the directors own 13% of the company and in our recent placement contributed $650,000 to that raising. We also have an SPP that's outstanding, closes in about 1.5 to 2 weeks' time with one of the directors there underwriting effectively half of that placement in the event that our shareholders don't take it up. In terms of our portfolio, I mentioned the 2,200 square kilometres of tenure. If you have a look, where Mount Isa sits over here, and we've got Cloncurry over here. So we're about halfway through. Our tenure starts on the highway here and extends for some 50 to 60 kilometres to the south, focused on two significant fault structures through the region. These fault structures are important because they are where the major deposits are found. It's where the Mount Isa deposit's found and George Fisher, owned by Glencore, Cannington out to the west, Ernest Henry up to the north, and importantly no major mineral discoveries along these two fault structures, but that is why we've picked up this tenure and the team have spent the best part of 8 to 9 years of pulling that all together and building what is I think shaping as a very interesting inventory. Our Kelman deposit is a pick of the projects at the moment in terms of mineralisation, 20 million tonnes at 1.8% copper equivalent, accounting for 350,000 tonne of metal, copper metal in the ground, some $3.5 to $4 billion worth of in-ground value. I mentioned our joint venture partner JOGMEC, so they're earning a 60% interest by spending $6 million on the dark blue area here, and we've had recent success at the Trafalgar Deposit up here to the northern end of that project area, and we drilled those holes late last year and early this year before the wet season came into Mount Isa, and we're on the precipice of getting back there and doing some more drilling. I'm informed that the drill rig is departing Brisbane and should be in Mount Isa by the weekend. In terms of the Trafalgar deposit, we've now had 4 holes into the project area, into the deposit. All 4 of those holes hit copper and gold mineralisation, shaping up anywhere from 20 to 55, 60 metres of mineralisation at grades of about 1% copper and 0.3 grams per tonne gold. Importantly, the deposit is open in all directions, not only to the north and south and at depth, but as we saw in one of our holes, this western zone of mineralisation was picked up here, and we also observe copper mineralisation further to the west and to the east of the project area. In terms of the Trafalgar Trend extends for some 4.5 kilometres from south to north. So you can see down here at a prospect called Victory, which is a couple of shafts mined in the early 1900s, pre-World War I, producing grades of up to 25% copper, and a number of areas along this magnetic trend Trafalgar, all the way up to prospects at the Springs, and I'll show you a short video in a second of a flyover there. In terms of copper in soils, the copper in soil anomaly runs all the way along that trend. The magnetic trend runs along there. We see in the mineralisation, we see magnetite and the copper and gold together. So I guess in terms of a marker, this magnetic trend is important and offers great exploration perspective. And we also see in this deposit, which is looking for all account of being some sort of structurally hosted deposit, we also see elements of rare earth mineralisation and magnetite, giving us, I guess, a geochemical signature which looks similar to a large-scale IOCG deposit, which makes this magnetic feature off to the northwest here quite interesting. This area has copper mineralisation on surface, old costines and workings from the early 1900s, and also has been undrilled. So the important point along this 4 kilometre trend is there's only 2 drill holes historically along that trend, both of them about 65 metres deep, one of them hitting copper mineralisation up to 1% and one of them missing the trend. So it's unexplored in the heart of the copper province and base metal province of Mount Isa, and I think there's a lot of potential. Not only the JV area, which is sort of these blue borders here, we have look-alike prospects in our own 100% grounds. The Trafalgar Trend, you can see the magnetics running up into Hammer's 100% grounds. We actually have a 9.5 million tonne, approximately 1% copper resource, JORC compliant resource at Elaine. We have a joint venture up with Glencore at Jubilee, another copper JORC resource, and we have prospects off this screen that I think we'll be looking to put a resource around later this year. So this is all about copper exploration, building an inventory to move us to that stage of being a developer rather than just an explorer. Just before I sort of move on from Trafalgar and the work we're doing here, here's a little flyover of the Trafalgar area, and you can see just down there some of the old shafts. So this trend goes for about 4.5 kilometres. The video's sped up. You can see the Trafalgar deposit just here where we've had the success in the drilling. This trend continues along strike here. You'll notice just up here there's some old workings, surface workings, also a couple of shafts in around this area, and the video will pull up at the Springs at 4 kilometres to the north, where you can see some of these old time shafts. So no drilling at these prospects, yet they were mined in pre-World War I to produce high-grade copper. So I think this is a really exciting area for us to be exploring in the coming year. In terms of the overall trends, you can see here the trend running from Trafalgar runs pretty much all the way up into our prospects up at Jubilee and Elaine. There's a parallel trend running along from the northern areas at prospects of Sunset and Jubilee. You can see some of the intersections that we've got at Sunset and Jubilee. They were before Hammer acquired the projects. Our idea is later this year to be up there and exploring, looking to repeat these results and define a JORC compliant resource up there. So that's part of the reason we've recently raised some money. In terms of the overall prospect, the Neptune group of prospects is only 2.5 kilometres away from Trafalgar. Sits in our 100% owned ground. The last drilling that was done here, 16 metres at 2% copper, some broader intersections up to 50 metres in width. We think there's some excellent targets in here, and this will form part of Hammer's own 100% funded drilling program that will be commencing, as I said, this weekend. I'd spoken before about Kelman, the 20 million tonnes at 1.8% copper equivalent. If you have a look at some of these grades at depth, 7.5 metres at 23% copper equivalent, that is what these systems are capable of producing. We did some work last year. We did a geophysical and magnetotelluric study looking for nearby exploration potential. You can see this very large conductive feature sitting off the edges, both sides, east and west of Kelman. We'll be drilling one of those structures as part of our upcoming drilling program, or with the idea of potentially hitting grades like this a little bit closer to surface. All about building a critical mass of copper inventory so we can move the story from being purely exploration to having a development option in the area. In terms of what we're drilling and what's coming up, I've touched on a few of these already, but we'll be drilling holes at prospects Lakeview, again old shafts, old workings, copper and gold mineralisation on surface. We'll be drilling some of the prospects nearby, the Neptune prospects. A prospect called Lady Rose will be part of this upcoming program, whilst we also test some structures down near Kelman, near our Overlander deposit, which is JORC compliant resource. And I think the prospect of us delivering some good news over the next 4 to 6 weeks is significant. And as I said, we're looking to add copper tonnes into what we've got in Mount Isa. What's next? One of the interesting things that's come up, and I get a lot of questions about this, so I'd like to touch on it briefly. With the success that we've had early at Trafalgar, our joint venture partner JOGMEC was approached by a number of Japanese end-user copper customers inquiring as to the possibility of selling the project. So JOGMEC are currently running a formal tender process to sell those projects. It's quite a unique situation. The Japanese government is effectively looking for copper resources to secure supply back to Japan. So these projects can only be sold to Japanese companies. So that process is ongoing, but importantly, the exploration focus and activities at Trafalgar continue while this process is ongoing. And ultimately, should that process be successful, Hammer will have a committed, focused partner looking to advance and develop Trafalgar and the Trend. I mentioned our own activities. We'll do this drilling program, probably around 3,000 metres of reverse circulation drilling. We'll come back later in the year. We'll look to define a resource at Blackrock and Sunset, whilst also following up other nearby Trafalgar prospects at the likes of Tiny Boot and Smoko Gossan. Before I run out of time, I'll touch very briefly on our gold projects in Western Australia, and we have spent some time on these projects over the last 2 years, and we have a number of good target areas. We've just completed a 10,000 metre air core program at North Aurelia. So these are focusing on areas that have never previously been drilled, focusing on a trend that runs from the north of the Aurelia deposit, a 1.1 million ounce resource being developed by Northern Star. We've drilled there. I expect those results to be out over the next month, and I think we'll get some good targets to follow up on out of that program. We also have the Bronzewing South project. So this sits immediately south of the Bronzewing 3 million ounce deposit. Has been very lightly explored over the years for a number of different reasons, but effectively we've got an untested corridor immediately south of the mine that hasn't been tested below a depth of 100 metres. So everything plotted up here, you can see 26 deeper diamond or RC holes, most of them focused on this shear zone that runs along the eastern edge of the deposit. Very few in the corridor that run to the south, directly south of the Bronzewing gold deposit. So I don't think there's many projects out there next to a 3 million ounce deposit without any deeper drilling. We did a program late last year, about 4.5 kilometres south. And what we encountered in that drilling to some 600 metres of depth was we actually encountered the top of the Bronzewing deposit or the Bronzewing geology. So our view is that this geology dips at about 15 degrees into our property, and we need to be aiming at sort of a depth of about 200 metres up to the tenement boundary to effectively be testing this system. So we'll look to do some drilling on this prospect later this year with some deeper diamond or RC drilling. And I think they're pretty good targets. We've just defined some better targets there using some gravity. We know the gravity targeting here works to look for quartz and carbonate veining. We tested that in these holes, and I think we've got some really interesting targets here for later this year. In terms of North Aurelia, I mentioned that 10,000 metre RC program. We tested some targets out here to the east of Target 3. They hadn't been tested before, some good soil anomalies out there, gold, associated mineralisation, arsenic, antimony. We followed that up. We expect to have those results back in the next month. We've also drilled to the east of Target 4 down here, so in quite close proximity to these Aurelia deposits here. We had been drilling to the western area here. You can see the blue dots. On one of our eastern extreme holes here, we picked up a shale unit which we think is quite important to the mineralisation and actually sits on the western side of the Aurelia deposit, which meant we hadn't been testing far enough east through here. So part of the program that we've done, 10,000 metres, we've extended our drilling out to the east out here and hopefully have picked up the prospective stratigraphy. So Bronzewing shaping is not as busy a year as last year, but still active there, still great targets. The key philosophy for the team is to be testing our best targets moving forward. We have plenty of them in Mount Isa, and we're looking forward to testing them over the coming month and in the second half of this year. Very aggressive program, well funded, $10 million in the bank, exploring for the right commodities in the right location with the right team. I'm looking forward to what the year can deliver, and I hope many of you follow the story through the year. Thanks very much.